In 1925, Egypt stood at a crossroads, an ancient land under British power yet yearning for true independence. King Fuad I ruled, but British troops still guarded the Suez Canal, a constant reminder of foreign control. The Waft Party, led by Saad Zaghloul, became the voice of Egyptian nationalism. Egypt was in the midst of a cultural renaissance, fueled by the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb and a surge of national pride. The tension between tradition and modernity would define Egypt's next century. The struggle for true independence was just beginning. The years after 1925 saw Egypt's monarchy, the Waft Party, and the British locked in a power struggle. King Farouk, who succeeded his father in 1936, was initially popular but soon became a symbol of corruption and excess. The Anglo-Egyptian Treaty recognized Egypt's independence but kept British troops in the Suez Canal zone, angering nationalists. World War II deepened British influence, fueling resentment and calls for real independence. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War exposed the monarchy's weakness and corruption, humiliating the nation. Within the army, the Free Officers Movement, led by Gamal Abdel Nasser, plotted revolution. On July 23, 1952, the Free Officers staged a bloodless coup, forcing King Farouk into exile and ending thousands of years of monarchy. In 1953, Egypt was declared a republic. The revolution was more than a change of rulers, it was a social earthquake. The old order was swept away, and a new era began. Egypt's destiny was now in its own hands. The Middle East would never be the same. The world watched as Egypt redefined itself. The dream of independence had finally become reality. But the challenges of building a new nation were just beginning. Egypt's revolution would inspire generations to come. The republic's first steps would shape the region for decades. Gamal Abdel Nasser quickly rose as Egypt's new leader, championing pan-Arabism and inspiring millions across the Arab world. Nasser's government launched sweeping land reforms, breaking up feudal estates and redistributing land to poor farmers. He pushed for industrialization and began building the Aswan High Dam, a symbol of modern Egypt. Seeking funding for the dam, Nasser's neutral stance in the Cold War led the West to withdraw support. In response, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal in 1956, seizing control from British and French interests. The move triggered a military invasion by Britain, France, and Israel. International pressure from the US and USSR forced the invaders to withdraw. Nasser emerged as a hero, having defied the old colonial powers. The Suez Crisis marked the decline of British and French influence in the Middle East. Nasser's vision of Arab unity and independence electrified the region. Egypt became a beacon for anti-colonial movements. The Aswan Dam was completed, transforming the Nile and Egypt's economy. Nasser's era was one of hope, pride, and bold ambition. But new challenges loomed on the horizon. The dream of Arab unity would soon be tested. Egypt's place in the world was forever changed. The legacy of the Suez Crisis endures to this day. Nasser's death in 1970 brought Anwar Sadat to power. Sadat opened Egypt's economy, distancing from the Soviet Union. In 1973, Egypt launched a surprise attack, regaining pride. In 1977, Sadat visited Jerusalem, shocking the world. This led to the Camp David Accords and peace with Israel. Sadat's peace brought acclaim and criticism. In 1981, Sadat was assassinated by extremists. Sadat's legacy of courage endures. After Sadat's assassination, Hosni Mubarak became president, promising stability above all else. Mubarak maintained the peace treaty with Israel and rebuilt ties with the Arab world, positioning Egypt as a key U.S. ally. His rule, lasting nearly 30 years, was marked by a tight grip on power, emergency laws, restricted opposition, and controlled media. Economic reforms favored the elite, while poverty and unemployment persisted for the majority. Cairo's skyline changed, but most Egyptians saw little improvement in their daily lives. Beneath the surface, frustrations simmered. A new generation connected by the internet dreamed of freedom and opportunity. Mubarak's Egypt appeared stable, but discontent was growing. The promise of dignity and justice remained unfulfilled. The seeds of revolution were quietly taking root. Mubarak's regime underestimated the power of the people. The old order was about to be challenged. Egypt's youth would soon demand a new future. The world was about to witness a historic uprising. The call for change could no longer be ignored. Mubarak's era was ending. Egypt stood on the brink of transformation. In January 2011, inspired by Tunisia's revolution, Egyptians took to the streets demanding bread, freedom, and social justice. Social media fueled the movement, as thousands gathered in Cairo's Tahrir Square and across the nation. The government's crackdown only strengthened the protesters' resolve. Millions joined, turning Tahrir Square into the heart of a peaceful uprising. The army refused to fire on the crowds, signaling Mubarak's weakening grip. Mubarak tried to appease the protesters, but their demand was clear: the regime must go. After 18 days, Mubarak resigned, handing power to the military. Egypt erupted in celebration. Decades of dictatorship had ended. The world watched as Egyptians embraced hope and the promise of democracy. The revolution inspired millions across the region, but the path ahead was uncertain. The struggle for real change was just beginning. Egypt's future hung in the balance. The dream of freedom united a nation. The next chapter would test that unity. The revolution's legacy would shape Egypt for years to come. The world waited to see what would follow. Egypt's story was far from over. The euphoria of revolution quickly gave way to political turmoil. The military, promising a transition to civilian rule, faced suspicion from young revolutionaries. Protests continued, and unity fractured as the military and the Muslim Brotherhood emerged as dominant forces. The Brotherhood, long banned, formed a political party and won Egypt's first free presidential election in 2012. Mohamed Morsi became president, but his rule deepened divisions. Morsi's controversial decrees and economic crisis sparked mass protests. Accused of overreach, Morsi faced mounting opposition. By summer 2013, millions demanded his removal. Egypt was once again at a crossroads. The promise of democracy was threatened by polarization and unrest. The revolutionaries who sparked change found themselves sidelined. The struggle for Egypt's future intensified. The nation was deeply divided. The dream of unity faded as old and new powers clashed. Egypt's experiment with democracy was in jeopardy. The next upheaval was imminent. The world braced for Egypt's next move. In July 2013, the military, led by General Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, removed President Morsi after mass protests. Supporters saw the move as saving Egypt from chaos. Opponents called it a coup against democracy. The crackdown on the Muslim Brotherhood was brutal, with hundreds killed and thousands arrested. Political freedoms vanished as the government declared the Brotherhood a terrorist group. Sisi, now the dominant figure, retired from the military and won the presidency in 2014. He promised stability, security, and economic revival. Mega projects like the Suez Canal expansion and a new capital aimed to modernize Egypt. Stability returned, but at the cost of political freedoms and human rights. Dissent was crushed, and the press tightly controlled. Economic reforms brought growth but also hardship for many Egyptians. The government argued these sacrifices were necessary for the nation's future. Egypt's political landscape was transformed once again. The hope of the 2011 revolution faded. The search for dignity and justice continued. Egypt's resilience endured through every upheaval. The nation looked to the future, shaped by its turbulent past. The story of modern Egypt was still being written. In 2025, Egypt stands as a nation transformed by a century of revolution, war, peace, and ambition. From monarchy to republic, from Nasser's dreams to Sisi's mega-projects, Egypt's journey has been dramatic and complex. The country is home to over 110 million people, its youth both a source of hope and a challenge. Mega-projects and economic reforms have modernized Egypt, but many still struggle with rising costs and limited opportunities. The political sphere remains tightly controlled, and the dreams of 2011's revolution are largely unfulfilled. Yet, Egypt's cultural influence endures, blending ancient heritage with a vibrant modern youth culture. The Grand Egyptian Museum stands as a symbol of the nation's enduring legacy. Online, young Egyptians connect and create in ways unimaginable a generation ago. Egypt remains a cultural powerhouse in the Arab world. Tradition and modernity coexist in fascinating ways. The search for dignity, independence, and a better future continues. Egypt's resilience and humor have carried it through a century of change. The fundamental questions of justice and prosperity remain. The next chapter is unwritten, but Egypt's spirit endures. The world watches as Egypt shapes its future. The story of Egypt is far from over, the journey continues.